Spa-Francorchamps. I can't get sick of you. I know there's some of you out there who are around to live it, lucky enough to experience it firsthand, but for the rest of us, do you remember when you found out that not only is Spa one of the coolest circuits in racing today, but that it used to be unbelievable? 14 kilometers, 8.7 miles of pure speed through the countryside. Spa was the most epic test of bravery and guts, speed as it wasn't captured anywhere else. There are other circuits which were famous for speed, like Monza and Indianapolis, but Spa, the speed at Spa is so much more visceral. For me, it was Grand Prix Legends. I had heard of old Spa before then, but Grand Prix Legends and my subsequent dive into all things vintage Grand Prix, and shortly, of course, Frankenheimer's Classic, cemented the legend that was Francorchamps. A bit of a sim history lesson then. Grand Prix Legends was the first which brought the full loop to our hard drives. For 1998, it was unbelievable, but even for Grand Prix Legends standards, its recreation was questionable for most. We had fun with it, and I'd wager outside of maybe Monza, the most virtual races in GPL have taken place on its wide sweeping layout over the years. And for years, that's all there was. Converted to almost everything out there with limited footage to compare it to, we didn't know better. It made an impact, but it didn't quite capture Spa. Then 2013 brought us the incredible and somewhat surprise release for R Factor 2. With the corrected track width, bumpy surface, increased trackside objects, and excellent physics model. Racing Belgium 66, as it was called, was one of the highlights of ISI's new sim. A representation which truly captured why the circuit was so revered and feared. So it was clear Grand Prix Legends Original simply wouldn't do, but luckily a dedicated and talented team were already hard at work to fix that. In 2014, after 8+ years of work, the wizards of GPL's modding group released their own, dubbed Spa70. A fully accurate, billboard-correct recreation of the Belgian classic as it was for the Grand Prix in 1967, and to this day, the most authentic version in my eyes. It hasn't received the recognition it should have, being for all GPL, but for those who know, this recreation is truly something special, and the perfect way to relive what makes Spa, Spa. So if I had my way, Classic Spa would be a mandatory addition to every sim, and so I'm delighted that as a part of the 1.4.3 update, Reiza have made good on their word and brought vintage Spa to Automobilista 2 to round out their Spa collection. And continuing the much-needed focus on the early 1970s, Reiza have set this version of the circuit apart quite uniquely as it was for the 1970 Belgian Grand Prix. The 1970 Belgian Grand Prix was significant in that it was the final Belgian Grand Prix to be held on the full 14-kilometer course. In the build-up to the event, drivers voiced their concerns at the ever-rising speed of Grand Prix cars. 1969's race had been cancelled over the demands of Jackie Stewart's safety crusade. But for 1970, the race officials begrudgingly obliged, fitting much of the public road sections with then state-of-the-art Armco barriers and installing a 60-mile-per-hour chicane at the blindingly quick Malmedy corner. Impressive given the length of the course and just enough to appease the uneasy drivers. Thankfully, that 1970 race went off without major incident. Mexican Pedro Rodriguez scored his second and final Grand Prix win and closed the books on the legendary high-speed course. At first glance, you may be reminded of the Project Cars 2 release, but Reiza have gone the extra mile with this one with impressive track details and physical models that really make it stand out. Period billboards, parked cars, spectators, amazing scenery, and of course I couldn't go without mentioning the animated cows. In AMS2, we don't exactly have the 1970 cars, but a couple of the vintage Gen 2 vehicles fit that 68 to 70 timeframe. So let's strap into Jackie X's 1969 BT26 to relive a little bit of classic Spa's legendary speed. Alright, so here we are on the grid. Hill start, of course, so we'll have to hold all three pedals. Green, we're underway. A lot of wheel spin off the line. The AI are so good at starts. So we'll rock it down to Eau Rouge. Rodriguez slips up the inside, another car as well. We come up Radillon. there's no way to make it too wide through there as I got another car slip up the left side of me here. But onto the modern day Kemmel straight, but anything but straight in the 60s and 70s, side by side. Finally get the position on my Brabham teammate behind. And come up to Lacombe. This is where the modern circuit runs off to the right, but we'll go left here onto the legendary course. Second gear there, pick up the throttle and try to accelerate well out of it. This is a long, fast section ahead. Fourth gear, fifth gear, flat out through these S's easily in these cars. Keep my eye open for fireworks in front as we'll head towards Bournonville, and I think this is one of the hardest corners on this version of the course. Feather the throttle in fifth gear on the way in, keep to the right side, and slowly let it start to fade down to fourth gear. Right at the house on the left, curve it back in, try to get a late apex, and then keep your eye open for the 200 marker there. Hard on the brakes for the Malmedy chicane. Down to first gear, 60 miles an hour, to the right, to the left. I want a good exit here as well onto the Mazda straight. You want a good exit on any of the slow corners of this course because they all lead onto really high speed sections. We'll rush here, fastest section on the course. Mazda straight towards the infamous Mazda kink, of course, where Jackie Stewart had his massive accident in '66. But now with a little bit of Armco barriers, right at the 100 marker, lift off the throttle a little bit on the opening lap, get the car pointed through, and then flat through the exit over the bumps and onto the Hollowell. Exhilarating speed at Spa. It's all the objects and things close to you that really amplify the speed that you're going. Come down to Hollowell here, site of many infamous incidents. Down to fourth gear for Stavolo. Second purpose-built corner for the course outside of Eau Rouge. We'll keep it in fourth on this lap. Nice exit there. Track tightens up a little bit and now points us firmly back towards the start-finish as I close in on the pack in front. So they're all going to slow each other down here quite a bit. It seems they really enjoy racing side by side through a lot of the course, but once they get it sorted out and decide who's quickest, it does get a bit better. All right, up to fifth gear. Through a series now of corners that are very easy to mistake for each other. Fourth gear for this one. I'll get a really nice exit here. We'll rocket past the Ferrari. A couple BRMs up here. This is a skin pack for the 1969 cars or the Gen 2. Whoa, as we get a little sideways there. Skin pack for the vintage Gen 2 cars, I believe they are, an AMS2 by a few folks. I know Juice is one of them. I'll put a link to it in the description, but really adds a lot to the set as Rodriguez slip past again as we'll come through Blanchimont, then back onto the modern day circuit. This is where the bus stop would be these days, and we'll come through the final real corner of the course as I think of it. To the left here and head towards La Source. Right before the 200 marker, hard on the brakes. We'll just let everything play out in front. This time, first gear, real easy to run wide here, but you luckily have a little space to do that. Slide it through in first gear, wag the rear end out, head back down the hill and start another lap. So we'll see where I'm back to. I lost a couple spots there, so P7 with 5 laps to go. Second gear as we'll head back up the hill, slide the car a little bit. I've tinkered quite a bit with the Gen 2 Brabham here, the BT26, the setup of it. Definitely have to lengthen the gears. I'll do a little thing right at the end of the video to go through the setup I did, but just enough to balance it, because balancing against the AI has been what is difficult. With the default set, they're way faster than you on the straightaways, so you gotta slow them down, which makes them way too slow in the corners. Losing them just a little bit here. I'll try to catch back up. I found they're a little slow on a couple parts of the course, but overall, Reiza has put a ton of work into them because this track, unlike many that they've developed in the past, has been available for folks to test out for the past few weeks. And I actually really like that they did this because you can get lots of feedback from lots of different people, not just the smaller group of beta testers. And it was neat to see them add more and more detail to it over the weeks and work out some of the bugs. They've definitely improved the AI a bit. I think still a little bit to go. So we'll come down to first gear for the Malmedy chicane. Oh, as I'm talking about there, we had a little bit of a mix up in front. We'll sneak past Silvio. Get away to the lead, but we'll see if we can track them down before the end here. That Malmedy chicane, definitely like the version of this circuit without it a lot more. And that chicane, I believe, was only run for the 1970 Belgian Grand Prix. For all the sports car events after it and every other race after it, I think they went back to the normal section through there, which is much, much better and is also included here. So we'll come through the Mazda kink. One of these two in front. I think we had a wall tap there. Slip up the outside though, hopefully. It's quite easy to link wheels. I guess I'll have one car to the left maybe. So keep it to the inside up to Hollowell. Just a little lift of the throttle. Get it planted on the way in. I think I'm clear to the left there. Down to fourth gear for Stavolo. One car trying to come around the outside. Should be able to get him here, though, up the inside to the exit. Real easy to understeer off there. All right, up to fifth gear. I'll slide past this BRM to the left as well. So sketchy going side by side here because the cars are so wide and the road is so narrow, and this version absolutely captures how narrow this course is. The original Grand Prix Legends version, I think the version for Project Cars, was so wide, and it really takes a lot out of it because it's how close all the objects are, how narrow the road is, that makes it feel so fast. You're going very, very fast, but it's everything that you're passing that's whizzing past you that really makes it feel as high speed as it is. Down to third gear. BRM closes up behind. We have a mirror full of them through the final couple of corners here as we'll end the lap. Right at the 100 marker, back down to third gear. It's so easy to understeer through a lot of these corners. So not quite confident enough in the car there. All right, heavy on the brakes, down to first gear. Try not to lock up, so we'll keep it on the inside through La Source. All right, got past one of them, but I got teammates behind me. Come down to Eau Rouge, 4 laps to go. These cars definitely feel so much different than the non-Aero Grand Prix cars, and they just have that bit more cornering speed. But the suspensions on these cars were very much designed without wings in mind, so they're still really soft. And you can tighten them up a bit, but you would notice, and that's why 1970 the cars started becoming so much quicker with like the Lotus 72 or the March 701 that I was talking about just a little bit ago. They were purposely designed for wings. They were some of the first cars that really took wings and aero into consideration from the get-go. So they were much stiffer cars overall and much quicker for it. Just keep my eyes on the mirror coming to Bernonville. It's got the slipstream. It's so hard to get away from other cars. We might be stuck with them for the rest of the race here. One of them ran wide though and into the wall. So the other version of the course, like I said, is definitely my favorite. And one thing I really wish, we've got Silvio Moser here coming up behind. One thing I really wish Reiza could do with this, and suggested it as well, is add more AI slots. Currently you can only run 22 cars here, but I feel like this course is very much at home for the endurance, sports car type events. So we've got a little less downforce on, I think, than the AI, so be able to pull away there into the Mazda kink. Running some of the vintage sports cars that they have, the Porsche 911, the Corvettes that they have in the sim, all the way up to even the Group C type cars and things, would be a lot of fun here. But at 22 cars, it's not quite enough to make it feel like one of those 1,000-kilometer races or the 24-hour races that this circuit ran. So I really hope they can raise the AI up into the 30s like they have at some of the other courses, so we can really fill this place up, do day to night transitions and all the different types of weather and things. It's really the first time we've had this type of track in a sim that's so flexible with so many different types of cars, and really would love to use it for all of those. So we'll wind our way here towards the end of the lap. It's such a tricky corner. You want to almost drive on that house's doorstep. Back up to fifth gear there. Something that was really nice to see when I first started driving this course in these cars is that using a lot of the same shifting markers and different lines and things that I've been using in Grand Prix Legends and in R Factor 2 for years. And so right off the get-go, this track felt familiar, but the bumps and things as we just get pushed to the outside there, go back to the inside, down a couple of gears for Blanchimont. The different markers and things are all very similar, but the bumps really add a lot of character to this version and make it feel quite unique compared to those other ones. Step through the final corner. I think I'm pulling in these two in front just a little bit as they're going side by side there. Chasing these two in front, we'll come across the line. 3 laps to go, P3, so I'm on the podium. If these two keep playing around with each other, maybe I have a chance to catch them. Just tiptoe here. So it gives you a lot of confidence in the track. I'd say the only place that's not quite the same as I've seen in other versions is around Stavolo. I'll point that out when we go through next time. It's a little bit tighter feeling, but overall the track just feels spot on, and the bumps and things add a lot of character. I'd say they're even amplified from the R Factor 2 version, which I remember when that came out, just how bumpy it was such a surprise, having raced the ultra smooth original Grand Prix Legends version for years. And the redone Grand Prix Legends version, I think Grand Prix Legends, although they've added bumps and things to it, it's not the best sim for track surface modeling. There's just a lot of limitations there. So having something that's this believable feeling, you can see the suspension working, is really, really quite nice. Down to 4th gear, chase it through Heusinkveld, come up to the chicane again. Heavy on the brakes, down to 1st gear. I think it was this track and the Nürburgring that really became the poster child for the safety crusade that Jackie Stewart went on. I think this track specifically, because it was such a dangerous course, tip it in to the Mazda kink here. A little bit wide on the exit, right to the edge. But this track, because it was so fast, and it's where Jackie had his infamous crash in '66 where he was trapped in his car with fuel surrounding him. I'm sure you've heard the story 100 times. But this track, and then of course the Nürburgring, where ultimately they had a terrible crash, but they were able to get a lot of safety enhancements and things done to these circuits. The fact that they did put Armco around as much as the circuit as they did, and you'd have to imagine if they kept racing here, they eventually would align to the whole thing, as I believe they almost did with some of the sports car races. But it was one of those circuits that just was never going to work out with how fast Grand Prix cars got. And so it's a shame racing went away from this track for so long, but we have to be very, very thankful that it came back. And 1983 was, I think, the first year back after they rebuilt the course in the early 80s, or late, I think, 1979, to add the modern GP circuit. So the two up front are still side by side with each other, but I don't think I'm pulling them in too much. It's going to be, I have to hope for some fireworks to catch up to them as we'll tiptoe it into the Blanchimont section here. These corners always catch me out, no matter the sim. They were some of the most difficult that we did with the 50s cars in R Factor 2 for the HRRC. We'll come to the end of the lap here. This one too, down to 3rd gear. It feels maybe a little bit tighter than I've seen, but again, there's no way to know if this track is 100% accurate. There's no laser scans that you can do. You can just survey kind of the streets and old maps and things, and so it's close, and that's all that really matters. I think the rest of them that exist are also just close to what it actually was like. Across the line though, so 2 laps to go, P3. Looks like a Ferrari out front. Got Surtees in front of me in the BRM. BRM, not so competitive in the late 60s, but of course 1970 with Pedro Rodriguez won this race. And that beautiful, what is that, the P183, I believe? I'm sure I'll correct myself on that, but that brilliant white and gold and red colored car with Pedro Rodriguez there. One of the most beautiful cars of the '70s season. second gear here, tiptoe it on the inside. You can see how much the bumps mess up this car as it gets into the corners, and it makes it so hard to drive. I mentioned that I don't think this Brabham's maybe the easiest one of this lot to drive. And it's the bumps that really mess with it. Maybe you could work on the suspension a bit more and tighten things up further. Into Bournonville here. Right out to the house on the outside. There we go. Nice flat out. And just dance the car there on the apex. Hard on the brakes. Really messes up the whole flow of the course. All right, into the chicane. Accelerate away. Had something to do, I guess, but it's such a thrill to fly through there flat out. And so thankfully they did include that other version of this course without the chicane. This might be the one and only time I run this version. But it's nice to have, since it was actually the final one run for the Grand Prix itself. And I believe they ran a chicane there in the 1930s, actually, believe it or not. In the late 30s, to even the playing field with the Mercedes cars, a lot of circuits started putting in chicanes, not necessarily for safety reasons, but so that some of the other cars would have a chance to catch those silver arrows. So at Spa, they did run a chicane there for a long time. Come into Stavolo here. Like I mentioned, purpose-built racing corner, tip it through Hollowell, and then into Stavolo. A nice banked corner, became part of the public streets, but was built for the circuit and circumvents a hairpin that was in the little village of Stavolo. It was almost run wide. You can see how much it closes up on you on the exit, and that's what's a little different on this version than R Factor 2 or Grand Prix Legends. But I don't know which is more correct. It's just one of those things that's interesting to note. So we'll wind our way here. And so I'm happy they've modeled this in the 70s because we do have other representations in the 60s, and it's, you know, not so different, but makes it unique in that way. I do prefer, I think, the no barriers and just that ultra natural type road circuit. But having it with the chicane, a little bit of safety added in, gives you that nice sense of progression. And because we do have 70s Grand Prix cars here in AMS2, not just these 60s cars, gives you something to race them on. Although F1 did not race here post the 1970 season or at all in the 70s after it, you can definitely insert this into your 1974 season with AMS2, and I haven't tried it yet, but I bet it'd be a blast. We'll come down and start the final lap, and I think I'm just about holding station with the two in front. They might have pulled out just a little bit, so one more lap to go. No matter how many times I've raced around this course, it still remains a lot of fun, and it's a great complement to other circuits to race somewhere like Monaco and then come to Spa. Just the difference in the two courses is what makes racing exciting, that it's so varied and it's not on the same location week after week. I always loved that about the 1960s calendars, that Spa and Monaco were often back-to-back like that. Almost feels like you're free when you come to Spa. You're able to really open up the car, and it suits different cars a lot better. The circuits are all so different that some cars that weren't quick at places like Monaco would be quick at somewhere like Spa or Monza. Turn the gears, final time here into the little chicane. A little wide there. Got big curbs on the inside and outside that you can bounce off of. Time blasting down the Masta Straight. Just see the two leaders in the distance fighting with each other, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get there. Things space themselves out after the crazy start. I do wish the AI would just be a little less aggressive. Maybe aggressive is not the right setting, because I do have them on low aggression. They just seem to try to make moves at the first possible opportunity, when in real life you would wait for a good overtaking corner, like Hollowell here maybe. although that's bitten me in the past. So dip it in there, just a little breath of throttle, then down to 4th gear, coming to the high side of Stavlo, let the banking catch you. Try to get the late apex, not quite getting it that time, onto the grass a little bit. It's all right. But you would want to wait until some of the good overtaking corners where the AI, as soon as they could get side by side, seemed to do so, which I think the main problem. They've added a whole bunch of logic and things to slipstreaming, which highly benefits some of the oval racing, and I know I'm definitely going to want to take a look at what's happening over there in IndyCar and kart world. But adding a little more thoughtfulness to overtaking, or maybe giving the AI places to overtake, I think would be that final cherry to making them absolutely perfect. So we'll come into the final few corners here at Spa, up to Blanchimont, now on to where the modern circuit meets up with this version, down to 3rd gear. Balance the car through, a lot of corrections to the wheels, can't get it to slide exactly as I'd want it to. Always kind of holding on for dear life here, down to 3rd gear. Bit of a narrow line, but we'll come to the final corner, still side by side in front. The spectators would be loving it. Down to 1st gear, lock up the tires just a little bit, but roll through the hairpin, La Source, onwards down the hill to end our fun race here at this beautiful rendition of Spa-Francorchamps. Now, I did want to show real quick a couple setup things, and I'm not the guy to do the ins and outs of setting up these cars, but I did find it important to make a couple tweaks to make the racing a little bit better. So specifically in the advanced setup for, I believe, almost every car in AMS2, you're going to want to max out your final drive, or at least play with this to make sure you have enough gear for a track like this. I found in all these Gen 2 vintage cars and the Porsche RSR 70s car that they're just too short, the gearing in them by default. I believe they're all on a slightly higher final drive ratio. So if you go all the way to the right, this one maxes out at 3.840. That's what I ran for this race, and you could probably tweak these gears a bit more, but that'll give you enough headroom so that you're not maxing out 5th gear so often. There's a lot of other stuff to play with in here, but if we jump back out just to the basic quick setup options, the other couple of things I played a lot with are the downforce and roll bars. I'm still not convinced I have the best settings for these, but at least this is what I ran for the race that you just watched. So 1 on the front and rear downforce. I found 0 to be just a little too unstable for the BT26 here. And you need the front downforce to help balance out the car and make sure you don't understeer so much. So 1 on the front, wings as well. And then on the anti-roll bars, I've gone up quite a bit on both ends to stiffen up the car overall and help get it to slide a bit more predictably. I think there's a lot more tweaking that could go into this, but the cars themselves are usually quite soft, which is good for some of the more curvy circuits, but for something fast like this, you do want a stiff car, especially with the wings. So Reiza's Spa 1970, I think it fully lives up to the expectations and deserves all the hype. There's not a lot of bad things you could say about this. The track itself feels authentic. There's really no issues at all with the modeling or anything like that. The scenery looks gorgeous and accurate. Comparing this to videos of Frankenheimer's film or footage that you can find from the time, there's of course the odd billboard and things here and there, but it's really very, very close, and I think gives a great impression of what this circuit was really like. You know, I said at the beginning, I think every sim should have this, and a sim like Automobilista 2 that has such a breadth of content, especially for vintage content. This track is always one that's not far away from conversation when you're talking about vintage formula or sports car racing from the 60s and 70s. So to have this version of it in Automobilista 2, I think just elevates the whole thing. In my opinion, this is one of the poster child circuits for this sim at this point. And I may be a bit biased being a lover of vintage racing, but it's so much fun to drive almost every car around this track. I've tried it in the sports cars and things like I've said, the vintage ones up to the Group C's, but I think it wouldn't be a bad course even for some modern cars. Certainly if you're looking for something where you can hit top speed, the non-chicane version of this I think should definitely be one you could go for. Of course, there are a few things I would love for them to address, and they're relatively small, but the AI, the way they drive each other, and the moves that they make mostly, they do all right driving the course. They might be a little slow in a corner here or there. They are able to put a race together, which is good, but wish they would be a little less optimistic with moves and maybe try to plan passing in a bit better spots and things like that. And of course, one that should definitely be fixable is adding some more garage stalls or grid spots to this course. Having it be in the 30s or even higher, that would really let us do those vintage sports car events and endurance events that I feel like would suit this course so well. So if you've been away from Automobilista 2 for a while or you haven't tried it yet, I can definitely recommend racing this course. If you're going to use the vintage Gen 2 cars like I did here, I really recommend that V8 fictional version or the Lotus 49. I think the Brabham itself is maybe not the best feeling of the lot, but it's certainly drivable with some of the setup changes I showed. But whether it's these cars or some classic sports cars or whatever you want, I hope you do enjoy this track. And I certainly hope it's a sign for what's to come with Reiza, because they absolutely knocked it out of the park. So with everything on the horizon, I have a feeling I'll be back in Automobilista 2 soon. So until then, thank you for watching. This is GP Laps, and I'll see you all again next time.